Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's Ask Me Anything. I am your host this evening. My name is Alyssa Fader. I am the executive director of Rising Organizers and Rising Organizers Action, which builds hyperlocal democracy through organizing across the country, but especially in our nation's capital, Washington, D.C. And I'm excited to have you all here today to join us for this expert Q&A. I have been a trainer with the National Democratic Training Committee, your hosts today, for quite some time, and I'm excited to report this is my first time moderating a panel with them, but not my first time moderating a panel. And I'm very excited to see some new and some returning faces to talk about what you can expect when you're protesting. So, as I said, my name's Alyssa. I use she, her pronouns. And as we get started, many of you are already dropping your information, who you are, your pronouns, where you're calling in from, whatever you'd like to share into the chat. So a real shout out to all of my friends who are already doing so. I really love Karen and Ken Buxton, whose name is just K Buxton, because they can share like that. I think that's actually delightful, as well as the concept of a town called Paliup. That makes me really happy. So thank you all for sharing where you're from. It's great to be here with all of you. And before we get started, I'm going to give a quick overview of NDTC. NDTC is how Democrats like you win elections. And we build long-term power by ensuring you have free tools and training that help you win wherever you're running. We are trying to enable every Democrat, no matter the background, zip code, resources, or anything else, to step up and lead change in their communities. And so I want to thank you all for being here. This is an opportunity for us to talk about building power outside of elections and how protesting and electoral work can work together. It's going to be a really interesting conversation. So the panelists that you're going to have today have a wide variety of personal and professional experiences and campaigns, and I'm very excited that you get to hear from them firsthand. So I'm going to turn things over to our panelists. I'm going to introduce each of them in turn very briefly, but I want to just offer a couple of housekeeping announcements first. The first is that we have 3 major norms that we use here at NDTC: be respectful, be present, and ask questions and participate. Speaking of asking questions, number 2, there's a Q&A box that you can find in your Zoom. That is where I'm going to ask. It's at the bottom if you click on more, unless you have you also might just see it, but if you don't see it, click on more and you'll see the Q&A box. That is where I'm going to ask you to put all of your questions today, because the chat, I'm hoping, will be an interesting conversation. The Q&A box helps us keep track of people's questions as they come in. So please use the Q&A box so we can get to all your questions and so we can track the ones we can't get to. And then finally, you can also turn on live captioning. So there's a live transcript button in the menu at the bottom of your screen, and you can click show subtitles. So I can't hear without my subtitles. So if you want to turn those on, that's how you do it. I will also note that Rhoda from the NDTC team is also on the call today. So she was going to drop some helpful resources. If you see her in the chat, say hello. Thank you, buddy. And she is our trusted expert on all things NDTC resources. So please give her a round of applause. So here's how our panel is going to work. Our panel here is going to combine the expertise of NDTC trainers and leaders in the democratic space for this conversation. And every month we host these collaborative conversations and spaces where you can discuss some of the most pressing campaign topics and other news of the moment, so you can walk away with skills and insights that make you a more effective organizer. And so today we're going to jump into learning about what you can expect when you protest. And I'm going to kick us off by introducing each of our panelists in turn and sharing a little bit about them. Their full bios are available on the event page. I believe that's where they are. So you can learn more about them and their various expertise, and we're really excited to have them here today. So the first person I'm going to introduce is Jara Butler. Jara is the Chief Impact Officer at Supermajority, where she directs the organization's programmatic work with a goal of building a powerful women's voting bloc. That bloc is going to achieve big wins for women and make the majority rules a reality for all people. So thank you so much, Jara, for being here. I'll turn next. I will offer or invite rather Joanna Klonsky. Joanna is the lead of Joanna Klonsky Communications Strategies, which is a Chicago-based communications consultancy that she founded, helps political candidates, elected officials, corporations, advocacy organizations, civic organizations create and implement strategies for communicating with their target audiences. And she has worked with many, 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 many really cool people and clients. So please check out her bio for that full list. And then finally, Kaya Jones is a strategist, organizer, and entrepreneur who's passionate about empowering young people and building community. She is the senior director of programming at Voters of Tomorrow, where she leads national initiatives to mobilize Gen Z and expand civic engagement. So everybody first, let's give a brief Zoom round of applause for our panelists for coming to hang out with us today. And we will jump right. Thank you all very much. I love a team that follows instructions. And we will jump straight into the questions that we have for all of you. So as I mentioned in getting started here, NDTC spends a lot of time training around elections and winning elections. And so it is unique for this conversation to be happening, unique to see a conversation on direct actions like protest facilitated by an organization that is primarily focused on supporting candidates for office and Democratic Party leaders. And so I'm curious if you can share more. What is it about this current political moment that's led to the tactics of institutional politics and grassroots protest converging like this? What have you been seeing that is bringing these different aspects of politics together? And I'm just going to start going in the order that I invited you all in. So, Jara, I would love your thoughts on this question.
Sure. Thank you so much, Lisa. I think at Supermajority, we started seeing a lot of this. This isn't the first time we've seen these kind of actions at Supermajority. Right at the genesis of the organization, we were formed right around the time of 2020, George Floyd. But uniquely, as we pivoted to focus on young women have told us repeatedly that they are tired, that they are seeing a government that doesn't work for them, and that they do not feel heard. And when people do not feel heard, sometimes the best way to do that is to action on our First Amendment rights. I think for some folks, especially now, where the grassroots and institutional power are aligning, and we all know that that doesn't happen often. Usually we are going in different paths and we diverge during an election season and then we split back up again. I think what is happening is our backs are against the wall. We are painted into a corner. And for once, the institutional power, and I consider myself, because I have a title, I work in an organization, I'm a grass top. We have found ourselves in a situation where we're all in this together, to borrow the song, and we all have to organize in a different way. People are people are realizing very quickly that our rights are being eroded. But I do believe that what has happened, I believe what happens in culture happens in politics. And I think what happened with Jimmy Kimmel, that was something that hit a lot of people in a very different way. Now, I'm speaking as a Black woman, and as a Black woman, an introverted Black woman at myself, this isn't my first rodeo. However, what I do see is that this had been happening to Black women since January of this year. Um, but finally, it's hit home and there's a face. So now people are willing to fight. But I think that this is a march, and this is a rally for our very existence. And so I think that's where these two are coming together. Um, I love to see it. And I hope that we learn a lesson that we don't need to converge only during these times of crisis, but we need to converge all the time because the people's power will always overcome. We just need to action on that.
Could not agree more. Kaya, same question to you. What is happening right now that's bringing all these different powers together?
Apologies for that. I couldn't find my
It's
unmute
always
button.
moving around. Not you.
No, but I think just to really feed off of Jar's point that like this convergent conversion doesn't happen a lot, but it is so necessary. And I think it's a real reflection of where we are politically. The stakes are so high, that we can no longer do the traditional things that may have worked in the past. We have to try new things, and maybe that's throwing things at the wall and seeing if they stick. Um, we know that electoral policy or politics moves policy, but grassroots movements can really shape culture and really provide a sense of urgency that we currently need right now. And I believe the two are really feeding off of one another. I think when we can see young people, labor workers and labor unions, elected officials, normal people just like you and I, all coming together to march. It's not only symbolic, but it's really a recognition of the systematic change that we need, both inside and outside pressures to come together to really create change. I've worked in campaigns. I most worked in the most recent presidential campaign where we saw a lot of this happening. I've also done a lot of work in organizing spaces, especially with young people. And what has always been clear to me is we can't do just one. Like, we can't vote our way out of something and we can't protest our way into something. We really have to do both.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And Joanna, same question to you. What do you feel like is going on right now that is bringing this convergence of institutional tactics and grassroots protests together?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me and for moderating this conversation, Alyssa. If I'm a little choppy, I'm having technical difficulties, so just flag for me and I'll join on a different device. It's really powerful to see all of you here for this conversation because I am reporting to you live from Chicago, where we are under federal occupation right now. And so this discourse about the role of protest couldn't be more salient. I am one of the leaders organizing the No Kings protest coming up here this coming Saturday. I think it's going to be one of the biggest protests Chicago has seen in maybe since the Iraq War. And it doesn't feel optional right now. For those of us who are experiencing something like what we've been experiencing in our communities right now, it's not a question of like, is this a good tactic or not? We have to show up in the streets, just like we have to show up at the polling locations, because consider the alternative. Can we allow them to do what they're doing to us and not have a massive response? And I would argue, no, we cannot. That would be the death of us all. So not to be so dramatic, but that's literally what's going on right now. I can speak more to it about, what we're experiencing. Some of it is happening in different ways. Like I said, Saturday is going to be big, although it's going to rain. So we'll see. But I think it's going to be big. 2 days ago, we saw a spontaneous crowd of 75 people erupt because ICE was on the scene in the southeast side of the city, and people just came out of their houses and created an impromptu protest. And that was critical as well. And so being able to be flexible, but being willing to show up physically is quite important right now, in my opinion. So happy to be here.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I agree completely. I'm similarly calling in from the People's Republic of Washington, D.C. We are also under federal occupation, and it looks like they will be playing around with that for quite some more time. So I agree completely, and solidarity forever with my former home, Chicago, Illinois.
Yeah.
So I want to turn to our next question, which is about First Amendment freedoms and protections. And I'm gonna go in a different order this time. We'll see where the world takes me. But I want to talk about the risks that people are taking, and also how to have a clear eye about those risks. So, what new risks exist for people exercising their First Amendment freedoms of speech and assembly, given the administration's increasingly aggressive posture and unique willingness to test the boundaries of legality? And I think it's important for us to ask this question. And I also think it's important for us to be clear-eyed about how to act in the face of concern and to have those concerns be really grounded in what we're actually seeing. I know that I'm seeing a lot of people complying in advance and not taking action because they are afraid when there are still many people taking far riskier actions and being okay. And so I would love for us to balance those things. How are we balancing the administration's behavior and its willingness to test the boundaries of legality, and how do we take action anyway? So I'm going to actually, maybe I'll just go the reverse order, if that's okay with all of you, since Joanna, you set us up so nicely for this one, and you're seeing this in real time in Chicago, people who are exercising their First Amendment rights and having those rights be infringed. So
Yeah.
yes, so anyway, so I feel very passionately about this topic, as you can tell. And so I would love to hear from you. What are some new risks, and what are some of the ways that you're seeing people exercise their rights in the face of those risks?
Well, yeah. Okay, you're talking to somebody who got tear gassed the week before last. That's new. I've been protesting my whole life. I was raised by organizers. Some of my very earliest memories are going to protests downtown Chicago, protesting nukes, protesting apartheid, you name it. I have never been tear gassed before. I had never been fired upon with pepper bullets before, which is bullets that explode into mace. Those are both new experiences for me in the last 2 weeks during this federal occupation. Am I choppy, or can you hear me?
We can hear you okay. The video's a little choppy, but you
Okay,
sound fine.
sorry if the video is crappy. I can always just go off camera,
Okay.
but
You're doing great.
so these are new things, and really, we're seeing many protesters being detained. We've seen many protesters dragged into the ICE processing facility in the suburbs of Chicago, and just held there and then ultimately released with no explanation. So these are new things to some of us. Maybe some of the older folks around have experienced some of this before. In 2020, during the massive post-George Floyd protests, we did not see tear gas deployed on civilians like this in Chicago. This is a whole other level. And so to me, it's critical to, one, not be intimidated by that. I don't know how many folks on this Zoom have been protested at all before, but I don't want anyone to hear what I'm saying and be like, that sounds scary, I'm not coming. I think it's more important than ever to show up now, take precautions, be safe, and we can talk about some of the practical tips for what that looks like. But showing up and making it clear to them that they can't scare us out of turning up and speaking out is, I think, basically like the whole ball game right now. Like, I can tell you some of my newly learned lessons about what to do if you get tear gassed, but we can come back to that. Fun facts that I've learned. The other thing is, finding ways to pursue the defense of our rights, not just through protesting, but also through the courts. So for me personally, after some of my bad experiences in the last few weeks, I've joined a big First Amendment lawsuit that's been filed, and now there's a temporary restraining order that a judge sided with us and said, okay, they have to stop tear gassing protesters unless very specific things are going on, and those things are not going on. They've already violated that TRO twice in the last week. So they're back in court today getting yelled at by the judge. Will they change? That's the big question. But I think we have to use all the tools. So that includes showing up, protesting, being online, not being afraid to go to court. We've got to throw sand in the gears every step of the way and not let them just roll us. And so I'm feeling that very acutely here in Chicago, but I think even if you're not in a place where there's, ICE masked men kidnapping people off the street, this is still probably true for you. And also, they're not going to stop here. Chicago's not the last stop on this tour that they're on. So I hate to say it. This may be coming for your town.
Yes, ma'am. Kaya, please tell us your thoughts.
I hate this, especially as a young person. And I think we all know as young people, we love to use our voice. And like Jara mentioned earlier, we want to be heard in what we're saying. And it's completely a tactic to monger fear. And what is so scary is like how normalized it's becoming for people to be punished just for speaking out about things that they care about, unless you're agreeing with the administration. Let me add that caveat because you can say whatever you want as long as it's racist or homophobic or so on, all the phobias. But we're seeing anti-protest laws and surveillance and a lot of imitation. And I really like that Joanna brought up like different tactics on the ground, but I really fear like the digital in the online attacks that I've been seeing. Like, it's not just a risk to get arrested anymore, but you can be targeted digitally and even professionally. And again, like, not saying any of this to scare anyone away, but to just be conscious of like what is going on and the current state of what can happen in protesting. But I think that's why we really have to protest part. You have to know your rights and be surrounded by community, and really like take care of each other. And just a few ways that that can happen is like, of course, trainings like this are really great. But then also encrypted tools. Signal is a chat that a lot of my friends and work uses, because the messages are supposed to say safe and secure. Doesn't always happen, but for the most part, it is. And also just move in community, take care of each other and lean on each other as support is really some of the things that I've been doing, because if the time does come where you're really standing down on your rights and that's posted online, you're going to want that support and you're going to need that support. So we're here for you. That's what I'll say.
Great. And Jara, please.
Thank you for the question. I grew up, my first actions are, I would say the first feminist and the first activist that I knew were my mom, my grandma. My dad was in the labor, so my first memories are knocking on doors for Jesse Jackson when I was 3 years old. My mom um, was part of a group of women office workers who were protesting Parkland Hospital for their unfair labor practices and salary imbalances that still exist to this day, by the way. So protest is nothing new to me. Also, um, I'm I consider it a blessing that my grandmother was born the first in our family outside of the institution of slavery, and my mother was integrated her high school. Um, and so they saw and witnessed the worst of brutalities just for existing. Um, my grandmother had to do poll taxes. I remember my aunt, who I adored, sold a cow in order just to vote. So these tactics are not new, because I'm Black in America. I've always been a threat. I can walk into Nordstrom today and someone's going to get afraid. Um, but I would love to say that, I've never experienced tear gassing or pepper bullets. I mean, I remember in 2016, I was in Dallas protesting the senseless murder of Alton Sterling, and we were shot at. Um, and I spent 24 hours sleeping on the ground in downtown Dallas because I couldn't leave. That is the reality sometimes that happens. But still I rise and still I'm here. I think that our First Amendment is the most sacred right that we have because it's more than just the ability to speak. It is about our news and the ability to know what's happening. Democracy dies in darkness. But democracy also requires us to be active. It is not a spectator sport. We all have to participate. And as Kaya said, voting is just one quiver. The rest of it is this part. Our First Amendment is the only way, in some cases, that we can get people's attention, and not just our elected leaders, but our communities involved in what is happening. I always say, let's go back a little bit as a student of history, and I want to look at the civil rights movement. And a lot of people don't know that there are three phases of the civil rights movement. There was the first phase that happened in the 1700s to about the 1800s, and there was the 1860s, which was the abolitionist movement, and it kind of stopped with Reconstruction. And then the next phase came through. And the reason why that was such a palpable thing, and I think we often forget, is that the leaders at that time, Diane Nash, Martin Luther King, Fannie Lou Hamer, the reason why they occupied space is because they wanted the TV, um, to they wanted the American public to see what was happening because people were being lied to. And it wasn't until people saw and witnessed children having water hoses turned on them and dogs attacking children that it finally became clear that you were being told lies. And unfortunately, that's where we are right now. We have to turn our cameras. That's why social media is such a powerful tool, is it's a way for us, that's still a part of our First Amendment right. And that's why it's important that we tell those stories. Protecting and securing our First Amendment, I think, is the most important way that we can actualize what it means to be a citizen in this country. Because our right to vote is not explicit in the Constitution, it is implicit and it's found in the First Amendment. So you have these two pieces. But the only way that we are going to bring attention to masked men taking children, throwing a 15-year-old on the ground in Chicago, taking an autistic child from a school and slinging that child around. The only way we're going to hear words that say, hear George Floyd say, calling for his mother, the only time we're going to hear I can't breathe is through the actions of people who were taking to the streets, who were talking, who were calling. And I think that is why this moment is so important. But it doesn't mean that our First Amendment right isn't under threat. That's why we have to continue to support local journalism. We have to continue to demand and do what we did with Jimmy Kimmel, but also we have to pay attention to what's happening with NBC News and removing Black, Latino, and AAPI news desk. That is also part of why we have to do this. So all of this together is under the First Amendment. So protesting and is what we is one part of this, but we're not just doing it for that. We're doing this because this is what makes us active participants in our democracy.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And I really appreciate the context that you're putting us in, Jara. This is a fight that is showing up for people who are on this call because they are new to protesting. It can feel like these threats are new, emergent, never been seen before. But of course, the history of racism in this country and the legacy of Black organizers in this country has taught us that these are threats that have faced people before, and they have survived them. Not everybody, actually. But that these are important lessons to take from the organizers who've come before us, that we need to act in the face of our fears and that we can still win. So I really appreciate that context from you, Jara. Um, my final my final question before I get to some stuff in the Q&A box is I'm going to start with you, Kaya, about how we can continue to build power after these big actions. And so the big actions like what we're seeing this Saturday with the No Kings protest are powerful, and we know that lasting movements take organized, sustained follow-up. What are some things that people can do in their day-to-day life after this weekend to have a systemic impact in their communities, especially people in states where there are Republican majorities in both chambers of the state legislature? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on what people can do after the march.
Thank you for this question. I saw this post recently that was like, what Americans are missing is that they need to be like the French right now and don't stop protesting until they see the change. And I really wish that was possible. I know if I could be out there every day, I would love to. But to answer the question more, I think sustained change happens when moments like this turn into movements. And after No Kings, that's where the real work comes. Like that's like the party, the fun to me. And then it's like time to get to work. And that can look like joining your local coalition or organization. I'll plug, if you're a young person or know young people, join a Voters of Tomorrow chapter on your campus or start one if you don't have one. Registering people to vote, of course, attending your local city or town hall meetings, and holding elected officials accountable to the things that they say, to if they want to keep their seat in office. I think in states where it is more hostile to show up, that may look a little differently. That might look like mutual aid or donating to organizations that are really doing this work. It could look like gathering in small groups and providing education, and bringing some new people in who just may not know enough. And I think that everyone really has a lane here. Like, if you're an artist, if you're a faith leader, if you're a small business owner, student, whatever that may be, you can make an impact in some sort of way. And I think if you are already connected, then that also means your next role is to bring more people into the fold and make sure that they're connected, and that they have the resources that they need to bring more people in. And that's how we just keep making this bigger and bigger. Um, Alyssa, I know you're at the Capitol, right next door in Baltimore. And I think, we can both say that this fight for democracy isn't just here. It's at your local community centers, it's in your town, on your campus, or even at your kitchen table. Like, Thanksgiving is coming up, and I'm thinking a lot about, like, okay, how do we equip people with how to talk to your MAGA uncle about what's going on in the world? So I think being prepared to have that fight, whether it's within your family or outside in the streets, we all gotta have that.
We actually, at Rising Organizers, we have an annual tradition of doing a how to have difficult conversations training before Thanksgiving every year. So if I will drop our website later on today, but if you or anyone on this call is interested in learning how to fight people better, I'm very happy to help you with that. I will, but to the point, Jara, I'd love your thoughts on this. How can people continue to build movements after this moment of this weekend?
Um, Great question. This is a movement, not a moment. I think that's the first thing we have to say. Because I think the work we've seen this happen. American get frustrated. Um, there's a quote that Rachel Maddow used to say, this is going to age me, back in 2004 when she was on the radio, and she said, Democrats fall in love, Republicans fall in line. On the progressive side, we sometimes are looking for someone to save us, and we need to realize that we save ourselves. No one is going to do it for us. We have work that continues that needs to be done. And just because we won an election, does not mean that we still don't, that work is still not done. I saw this in 2008, everybody was so happy in 2009, and then we just kind of fell off. And in 2010, we had the redistricting, and then we have been fighting ever since. I think that we have to continue to do this. One of the things that I took away from 2024 that broke my heart is that it wasn't just that the ultimate rejection of a Black woman, because we all experience that, but it was the fact that I think we were so focused on the win that we weren't thinking about what the loss was going to look like. And it took us a minute to realize what was happening. And now that we're in it, we have to stay committed to it. So as Kaya said, get involved. I'm going to plug Supermajority because we are actively in GOTV right now. We're actively protecting our First Amendment right in California under Prop 50. Just going to throw that out there as a plug. If you're interested, please come. We have 38,000 voters still that we need to contact. So there's that. We also are investing in community organizing, old-fashioned community organizing. There our Cecile's Leaders Program, which is training community leaders to do things. We've had everything from come shop with me, vintage, and also we're going to talk a little politics, to let's go hang out at a cigar bar. But I'm also going to tell you about how we can make things better. Cecile's Leaders, I think, is the thing that gives me hope. But we also, at the beginning of the year, created what we call the Trump 2.0 toolkit. And that toolkit in and of itself is part of it. It's mutual aid. It's giving people the resources. It also provides a protest guide. I'm not promoting these things because it's something that we do. I'm promoting these things because I don't care what you do on Saturday. I want you out there in the streets, but I also need you to march and find your local committee. I need you to find your local PTA. I don't care what it is, and get involved after the protests. Because after the protests, ICE is still going to be on the streets. People are still going to be going to immigration court. We still have a criminal justice system that is flawed in this country. We still have women who have lost their rights in this country. We still have people who are underpaid in this country. We still have a fight against unions in this country. We still have so many things that are out there that Saturday is just giving us an opportunity to make our primal scream. But come Sunday and Monday, we still have work to do. So have fun in the moment, but remember the moment is the movement, and the movement is the moment.
Awesome. And Joanna, yeah, tell us how we can, tell us how we can keep going, keep building.
I think about this question and I think back to 2016 and this moment 8 years ago, and how, as awful as this is and as awful as it was then, it was also a very generative time in terms of a whole new, like tons of new people getting involved in new ways that they had never really gotten involved in activism or protested or joined their local organization. And so I see, at least here in Chicago, just we're being flooded with new people who are suddenly saying, whoa, this is crazy. What's going on? How can I get involved? How can I support my neighbors? What does it mean to join a local rapid response team to go out and help protect my neighbors from ICE? What does it mean to join the mutual aid group? And so I think that's what that's my only silver lining, is that I think it's kind of like strengthening the fabric of our very real neighborhood communities, block by block. People are getting to know each other because they're like out in the street filming ICE on their own block and talking to the other guy who's also out on the street filming ICE. So there's a lot of potential there. We have been really intentional with No Kings to make sure there are like next steps, QR codes everywhere. How do I scan and get involved and stay in touch and stay aligned? And so I think, we're organizers. So we always think about, okay, well, while we're doing this tactic, how can we build people in for the next tactic? So to that end, since everyone's making plugs, I don't have like a formal thing. I'm just going to drop into the chat. We made like an informal Google Doc of like, here are some ways you can support Chicago if you don't live in Chicago. So I'm just going to drop that in for you all. And also just welcome anyone's ideas, because we've never been here before. We're making this up as we go along, literally. So yeah.
If I could just add
Please.
one more thing, during this time, I really love this quote by Coretta Scott King. The struggle is a never-ending process. Freedom is never really won. You earn it and win it in every generation. And I think that just speaks so true to the moment that we're in right now. I had the pleasure to go to Kamala Harris's book tour in Washington, D.C., and she often says the same thing, that we have to keep winning this fight and fight for the future of every generation. And it was funny, during her book tour, she said, so if I would have won, like, y'all thought that would be it? And we were all like, yeah. But she's like, no, like, and I think that's really such a good point. Like, no politician is going to be our savior and is coming to save us and going to have all the right answers. Just as adversely as like no one politician can knock us down, no one administration can make us something that we're not. And I love what Deanna said in the chat, like, we must save ourselves. So I think that's what we're doing here. We're showing up to in an effort to save ourselves.
Great. So this is a moment where we will turn to the questions that you all have, dear audience. Many of you have already started dropping questions in, and I'm going to get to as many of them as I can, which might mean combining some a little bit. So, but this is also a moment where if you've been so locked in, you haven't come up with a question yet, love that. Drop it in now, and hopefully we'll be able to get to it. So I want to start off, and for my panelists, if you have something to say on this question, let's go. If you don't, then that's also fine. I don't believe in making people talk, but these are good questions, so I'm excited to hear your thoughts. We're getting a couple of questions about how to prepare for the day of. So what should people bring to a protest? What should people be prepared for? What should they do with their phones? All of these kinds of preparatory questions. So when you're thinking about protesting or when you're bringing other people to protest, what do you suggest they be prepared for day of? What should they bring, etc.? And I'm curious if anyone wants to kick us off. Jara's ready.
I
Go
can do.
ahead.
Yeah, I'm ready.
I'd love it.
So first things first, I think this is the first protest where I would advocate not bringing your children, given the hostility and the climate. I have a younger brother. He's 18 years old. He has gone with me and he's been in these streets. He's 18, he can make that decision. He's a voter of tomorrow, Kaya. So he can make that decision for himself. But I would advise that we might want to reconsider. The second thing that I always say is have your name and whoever is your emergency contact on your arm. That's identifiable. It's very, very important that you have that available. Because usually and have it on an arm that like your less dominant arm. The other thing, please make sure that you have your identification with you. That is incredibly, incredibly important that you have your identity, especially when we can anticipate federal agents to be around, have that. The other thing, of course, is water. Bring water, wear comfortable shoes. Consider it like you're an athlete. So things with cushion in them. And if you are going with a group, always make sure that you have a designated meeting spot and that, yes, I think no kings, everyone should wear yellow, but have something that's identifiable for you. So like I like hair bands. So sometimes I wear scarves or something up here that is identifiable. Um, I can tell you that in 2016, it was absolutely helpful when I had that because that was the way that people, when chaos struck, they knew what I was wearing and they saw what I was wearing. Also tell someone where you're going so that they know where you are. Now, this is new. Technology is real. Um, and I know that we like to post our pictures. We all like a selfie moment. But I'm going to advocate that if you are going to do so, you might want to turn off your location services, unless there is an emergency. I think let's be mindful of the people who are around us who may be targets, um, and be careful of how we are posting and what we are saying. It's an exciting day. We all want to tell that story, but be careful about the people who are around you. And the most important thing is that there are going to be safety folks. And as a former safety folk, please, please, please listen to them. If they're telling you, if they're barking orders at you, they're not barking orders at you to be mean or hateful. They're barking orders at you in order to keep everyone safe and protected. And the most important thing is if you feel like something is not right, take advantage of that and go.
Yeah, I think that's great advice because there's a lot of questions about how to manage all of that in the Q&A as well. So thank you. Kaya, Joanna, is there anything you want to add about things to expect? Kaya, go ahead.
Jara
Kaya hit the
covered
buzzer first, so Kaya.
so much. That was so valuable. I think the only thing that I will add is, especially for me, I want to go with my friends. I want to make sure that I'm surrounded by people that I know and care about, and also that I'm continuing to bring more people into the movement. So I'll be with my friends, family, my siblings, and we'll all be doing this together. And another thing is, be prepared to have your sign, and your voice, because there will be a lot of chanting. So we're having a little sign making party at my house with just a group of friends. It's just one way to like get people excited and feel prepared, and for us to even share some of these tips with our friends and family who have never protested before about how to be prepared.
Great. Joanna?
Okay, I don't know where everyone is. I think for the vast majority of you, protesting is not like something to be scared of or anxious about at all. Like you should wear comfortable shoes, show up ready to kind of like, don't be shy about joining in the chants and the songs and cheering and making noise and maybe even lead some of that. I think that where things get dicey is there's two things, right? One is like you have to know your own risk level of what you're comfortable with. If you are vulnerable and don't, feel comfortable, you can engage in other ways. You don't have to like go into the center or in the front of the protest, or even go at all. But if you can go, all of the tips that Jara and Kaya have mentioned are really important. I think look for the helpers. There's always marshals, people with vests, police liaisons, medics present, just like, quite frankly, with other large scale events. If you've been to a big concert or other such event, there's always going to be people who are there to help in a big crowd. And so be aware of yourself, your surroundings, just like you would in any other large event. If things start to feel wild, if you're not present with the goal of participating in civil disobedience, like the odds of you walking into a situation and getting arrested or, needing to have that phone number written on your arm, I think it's always a good precaution, but like the odds of that happening are probably low. If you are interested in participating in civil disobedience, I think that's like a whole other arena workshop that we should do. But those are really, I think going in with a plan and knowing why you're showing up and what tactics you're ready and comfortable engaging in and what you're not is just incredibly important. Hopefully none of you encounter chemical agents like we're encountering here in Chicago. I am now the proud owner of a respirator and like other things for what to do if you get tear gas. I don't think that's happening en masse in other places in the country, but like, as I said, I would watch Chicago closely and LA to some degree, and DC to some degree, and consider us like Paul Revere, because like I think some of this stuff is being tested out. In fact, they called Chicago a testing ground. I think some of the stuff that you're going to start seeing here is going to come to a neighborhood near you. So unfortunately, I would say like start reading the Chicago media outlets and keep an eye on us.
Chicago Sun-Times at it again.
Yeah.
I appreciate all of that from all three of you. I feel like when I was a young organizer, I think I didn't understand how much intentionality goes into civil disobedience and how much planning goes into it. And so, of course, the thing I keep telling people as an organizer myself is we can't control the state. We can't control police reactions. And so we want to be prepared, as Jara has given us some excellent instructions on, in case things pop off, because we just can't control all of our elements. And at the same time, we should remember that the vast majority of the time, when there is a civil disobedience action, it is because it has been pre-planned. And so if you are considering civil disobedience and you are doing that by yourself, stop. Find somebody who's doing it, who's like building an organization rather than acting independently. That is really not something that I personally would recommend as an organizer. So bear in mind, we want to be as safe as we can. We can't control all of the elements. We can control ourselves. But something that you've been saying, Joanna, that I think is also really helpful for our next potentially final question is you talked about marshals and safety captains and medics, people who are out there doing the work. And there have been a few questions about what to do if they see possible agitators or if they're de-escalation techniques. And I'm hoping you could share a little bit about at least the roles that other people play at the protests in these moments, if there's an escalation of some sort, if that's something you've seen, and also if there is any advice that any of you have for if people see any sort of provocation or escalation that they want to flag for organizers, what should they do? So Joanna, yes, I would love if you could start us off by sharing a little bit of what people should do and what roles exist to de-escalate at marches.
And I was just about to flag April Cornelius's comment. So yes, there are sometimes, especially in a moment like this, you will see provocateurs or people who are showing up to cause chaos. And like the power of your gut is just never underestimate it. I would definitely trust it. If you notice something weird going on near you and it makes you feel uncomfortable, if you are not trained in de-escalation tactics, then I would simply flag it for the nearest marshal that you see. Just point it out to somebody, and then I would probably just move away to someplace where you're feeling safer. There are people who are trained, and there are trainings you can take in de-escalation tactics and how to sort of like make sure that people who are there to cause problems are identified and addressed and moved out of the scene quickly. Some of the sort of tactics I've seen like that, the last big demonstration here, I saw like a guy really trying to get into a confrontation with the cops who were mostly like, didn't even want to be there themselves and weren't really bothering us. And he didn't seem to be there with any friends or anyone else. He was just kind of a loner and started like screaming epithets and wrote epithets on the sidewalk in chalk and pointed an arrow. He wrote like pig or something on the sidewalk and then pointed the arrow at the cop and was really trying to provoke the cops. And so I just like kind of watched him for a beat, kept an eye on him, and as the march moved, I think the cops also could tell what was going on and we're kind of like, okay, buddy, just keep going, keep it moving. And it kind of solved itself. Nobody needed to intervene with him and he didn't do anything else. But it's just the sort of thing that you can notice because you'll look at someone and it'll be clear, like, who is that guy? Who is he here with? If you're in a smaller community, you might be like, I've never seen that guy before. I had another thing like this happen recently. I'm on a bit of high alert because I've been protesting at the ICE facility, and we had that horrible incident in Dallas happen recently where there was a shooter on a rooftop near the Dallas facility. So I'm always on alert. I saw a guy who didn't seem to be there with anyone, who looked like he had tactical gear on, and I was like, something is telling me in my gut that that guy is not here with us and that he's here to cause problems. And so I pointed him out to the local security folks and the basically traffic cops who were there to make sure nobody got run over by a car. And that was the dynamic on site at the time. You have to just evaluate, use your common sense, trust your judgment, and decide for yourself. But I would generally not encourage people to like run up to someone and confront them themselves, unless you're trained to do that, which you're probably not. That's it.
And it's just so we're on the same page in terms of identifying marshals. I've usually seen people wearing like a vest, like a reflective vest. Is there anything else people should keep an eye out for in terms of identifying marshals that you all have seen?
Yeah, if you have National Lawyers Guild in your town or city, they'll usually wear like a bright yellow hat. Those are legal observers, and they're also there to monitor and make sure that your legal rights are protected.
Great. Jara and Kaya, we have very little time left, but is there anything else you all want to add on this question?
I think the only thing I would add is that just emphasizing Joanna's point that it is not, no one is, the everyday marcher is not familiar with being able to hold people accountable who are bad actors, and remember they're bad actors for a reason. Your gut is, trust your gut. If you feel that something is off, it's important to find someone, speak up, say something, because you might save a life. You may de-escalate just by saying something. And please pay attention to instruction. And also don't go out looking for these things, right? Instead, we all need to go into this weekend assuming positivity. Let's go in joyfully and with hope. My favorite story is from Sister Fannie Lou Hamer, whose birthday was October 6th. And she always said, she never went into any movement, any part, assuming the worst. The worst would happen, but she faced it bravely. And that's what we're going to need to have, is the courage that comes from joy. So let me just encourage you all to walk into this with joy, to know that you're not alone. But if you do see something, it's okay to say something and to speak truth. And then this is probably the thing that we're not, kind of talking about the afterward. If you see on Facebook, if you see in your neighborhood, if you see blogs, if you see, on your local newspaper, and they're trying to say that something happened. This happened to me a few years ago, where an elected official accused us of being aggressive. I said, ha ha, we've
Mhm.
got video that said that didn't happen. And the reporter had to post that video on our local news station, which is now owned by Sinclair Broadcasting, just saying that. But I would encourage you to push back and say, but don't use the word, it was all peaceful. Say, be clear about whose narrative is out there, and instead say, I was there. I didn't witness this, and continue to do that. That's important.
Kaya, I can give you 30
Yeah.
seconds on this.
Okay, I love the share after of just like one, making sure everyone that you're with got back home safe, share your experience online and with others in real life, pictures, videos, and through storytelling, and then attend like whatever those next steps are, whether it's like a next virtual or in-person meeting. Just keep that energy, and turn it into action however you can, and of course hydrate, eat, rest, process all your emotions. That is all part of healing and part of the work too.
Great. Okay, this is our panel. I want to do a very quick one sentence from each of you. What are you taking away from this conversation, or what should the participants take away from this conversation? And then we're going to close ourselves out with some resources. So Joanna, I see you, so I'm going to go with you.
Yeah.
What's like your one sentence takeaway from today?
I just am so moved that you are all here and interested in doing what you can. Be brave, show up, use your voice. Don't be scared. We're gonna make it through as long as we stick together.
Great. Jara?
I would just say that hope is the one thing that we have that cannot be taken from us. And let that be the spark, and that you use to not only keep yourself aflame, but to spread that around with everyone around you, because hope is the thing that they want to diminish. And as long as they can't extinguish that, we win. So hope, 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 and enjoy Saturday. Enjoy it.
Great. And Kaya?
Um, I would say that don't think of today or Saturday as the end. It's really just the beginning of your chapter in changing the future. In this moment, we need both organizing and protesting. So just show up when and where you can at all times.
Great. All right, thanks, folks. I have a couple more resources I'm going to drop as you leave. First, the Thanksgiving training that I mentioned is going to be available through Rising Organizers, so you can keep an eye on that. Also, I want to share a bunch of resources that will help keep you safe, and help you get a sense of the kind of protesting that you will be seeing this weekend. Again, have some fun. You deserve fun. Everything's bad, but you're allowed to do it. And then also actually a couple more, I apologize, that I'm just going to drop in here. Other than that, thank y'all very much. Rhoda is going to drop some more information about how to follow us on the internet. And we'll see you in the streets.